And a good Monday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Hopefully you had a great weekend. Thanks for spending some time with us here on this Monday morning. We've got a busy show for you today. The news of the weekend was President Donald Trump making his way to North Carolina on Friday to survey and check out hurricane recovery and relief that is continuing ongoing in the western half of our state, of course, still dealing with the devastation left from Hurricane Helene. We'll get to that coming up in just a few minutes. Plus, we'll be joined by Shawn Hendrix coming up a little bit later on in the program. He's was on the ground in western North Carolina on Friday. We'll get some pretty amazing insight from him coming up here in just a few minutes. However, we do start with some breaking news here in Wilmington this morning as portions of North Front Street are closed due to a gas leak. This coming in right around 5:30 this morning. Fire crews are responding to a gas leak on North Front Street. According to crews on the scene, the gas leak is believed to be coming from a manhole in the area. So as of right now, North Front Street is closed from Market to Chestnut and 2nd to Water Street. And that could be closed from anywhere from 1 to 6 hours, while crews continue to work on that gas leak in the portions of downtown Wilmington. So if you've got to head down there this morning, be advised the area from the earlier reports, this was right around the Beer Barrio area. So if you're going to be heading to downtown Wilmington, be advised crews are on the scene there. There is some sort of gas leak that is going on. We'll see if we get an update throughout the show, and we'll pass those details along as soon as we get them right here on the Nick Craig Show. All right, let's turn our attention to what was Friday. President Trump, obviously, has been in office now not even 7 full days, right? It's a little after 7 o'clock in the morning. He was inaugurated at noon 1 week ago. So he hasn't even been in office for a full week yet. And he definitely wasn't in office for a full week on Friday when he made his first trip out of the White House, first trip out of Washington, D.C., to portions of North Carolina to survey the damage and destruction that continues now more than 150 days after Hurricane Helene ravaged portions of this state. It was an awful storm. And it wasn't even just the storm itself. It was incredibly heavy rainfalls in the days and weeks leading up to Helene that caused the situation, which was going to be bad no matter what, but really exacerbated the issues and caused that storm to cause so much more damage and destruction because the ground was so overly saturated already. It didn't take much wind. It didn't take much more rain for some of these very large and heavy trees to easily be uprooted, fall on individuals' homes, and just wreak havoc and hell across portions of the state. So President Trump landed in Asheville around 11 o'clock Friday morning, and he met with reporters right outside of Air Force One and took some questions and talked about the hurricane recovery, the hurricane relief, and exactly what's going on right now. Or what continues to go on. Here is the president on Friday, just minutes off of Air Force One. Take a listen.
Everybody thought I was going to California. I said, no, I'm stopping in North Carolina first because they've been abused by what's happened. I mean, it's terrible. It should have been done. It should have been, a lot of things should have happened that didn't happen. So we're here. We're going to fix it out. We're working with the gentleman behind me, and you know who they are, and we're going to fix it. And we're going to fix it as fast as you can. It's a massive amount of damage. FEMA has really let us down, let the country down, and I don't know if that's Biden's fault or whose fault it is, but we're going to take over and we're going to do a good job. We're going to assign Mr. Watley, who's fantastic, frankly, and the governor and everybody else that's going to work. We're going to supply the money, supply a lot of the money. Maybe you have to chip in something. You'll chip in a little something, like maybe 25% or whatever. But we're going to get it done as quickly as we can. And we want to take care of the people of North Carolina. It's so interesting. Everybody's talking about California, and that's a mess. But I said, I'm not going to California until I stop in North Carolina. So here we are. We're going to go visit the site, and we're going to work with probably 3 of the congressmen, Republican congressmen, who've been fantastic, whose areas have been affected, and with Michael Whatley, the governor, and whoever else is, we decide to get involved. Probably less FEMA, because FEMA just hasn't done the job.
And I'm going to stop right there. We'll finish the clip. Trump, of course, is referring to Michael Whatley, who is the head of the Republican National Committee. You might be scratching your head and wondering, what is his relevance in all this? Well, of course, Michael Whatley from North Carolina, previously the head of the North Carolina Republican Party before rising to be the leader of the RNC. He knows the state of North Carolina very well, and President Trump obviously has a lot of respect for Michael Whatley and the job that he did not only in North Carolina but now at the RNC. And in it being his home state, is going to be bringing the RNC chairman into some element. We don't exactly know what it will look like, but some element of the recovery efforts. More from Trump on Friday.
And we're looking at the whole concept of FEMA. I like, frankly, the concept when North Carolina gets hit, the governor takes care of it. When Florida gets hit, the governor takes care of it, meaning the state takes care of it. To have a group of people come in from an area that don't even know where they're going in order to solve immediately a problem is something that never worked for me. But this is probably one of the best examples of it not working. And there's been some others, like in Louisiana, etc. So we're going to be doing something on FEMA that I think most people agree. I'd like to see the states take care of disasters. Let the state take care of the tornadoes and the hurricanes and all of the other things that happen. And I think you're going to find it a lot less expensive. You'll do it for less than half, and you're going to get a lot quicker response. So that seems to be the recommendation, but we'll be making that recommendation over the next couple of weeks.
So that's Trump in North Carolina on Friday. Now, like many of you, the idea of getting the federal government out of the way for hurricane relief, or really getting the federal government out of the way for literally anything, sounds pretty good. I have really no objections to what the president said there. However, it cannot be lost on us, and we cannot just forget the issues that have taken place in North Carolina under previous Democrat administrations dealing with hurricane relief. We can't just close our eyes, plug our ears, and yell la, 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 and forget that this state, North Carolina, has an incredibly checkered past with hurricane relief and recovery. I'll take you to the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency, a department that was spawned up under previous Governor Roy Cooper, which was tasked with dealing with hurricane relief in the eastern half of the state, dealing with storms Matthew and Florence. Matthew was 2016, Florence was 2018. It's a long time ago. Matthew happened almost a decade ago. So this is something that is, at this point, pretty square in the rearview mirror. Hurricane Matthew did not happen yesterday. Didn't happen 150 days ago like Helene. And the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resiliency, NCORE, as of right now, as of this morning, is running a $300+ million budget deficit. And there are more than 1,400 families that are still without homes from those storms. So while I agree with the comments from the president, and while the points that he makes in regards to hurricane relief are good, and yes, getting FEMA, getting the federal government out of hurricane relief, at least in the immediate aftermath, and funneling that money to the states and allowing them to handle it, we have to be very careful of that here in North Carolina. We have had some really awful issues in this state due to failed and incompetent leadership here in North Carolina. Governor Roy Cooper and his Department of NCORE, which again, he single-handedly spun up himself. And yes, of course, it's always easy to punch at one political opponent or another. I get it. But NCORE was Roy Cooper's baby. He single-handedly started the department. It was under his watch, his direction. And the former director of NCOR, Laura Hogshead, did an abysmal job of handling the department, and admittedly so. Said in hearing after hearing in front of the General Assembly that, we weren't watching the money as carefully as we should have. We weren't doing this as carefully as we should have been. We probably should have paid more attention to this or more attention to that. So, yes, FEMA is broken. Yes, there are major issues when the federal government comes into a state, comes into an area, doesn't know the geography, doesn't know really anything about it at all, and attempts to lay out or roll out relief or recovery. Yes, there are major issues there, and that needs to be dealt with. But at the same time, states like North Carolina have an awful track record of hurricane relief, and that scares me. Now, Josh Stein has stepped away from NCOR. It's still a department. It's still an agency. It's still under his watch now that Cooper is gone, termed out as governor. However, he's got a new group that he is starting up. Josh Stein has commissioned the Governor's Recovery Office for Western North Carolina, or WNC, which is a group that is going to be responsible for the cleanup in the western half of the state. Now, this is not political at all. And when I say this, I genuinely mean it. I hope and pray that WNC does not commit any of the same fouls, does not commit any of the same mistakes that we saw with NCOR. Because the people of Western North Carolina do not have the time, do not have the ability to wait a decade for hurricane relief, which is unfortunately what folks in the western half of this state, or in the eastern half of the state, have dealt with under previous administrations. I'm not going to shortchange our failures in this state. And it's uniquely a North Carolina issue. When Trump says states should be responsible for relief, he's right. Because the states know what's going on. The states are literally the boots on the ground. They know the geography, they know the area, they know the people. It makes perfect sense. And our neighboring states, like South Carolina, do not have the same issues that we do here. Individuals that were affected by Matthew and Florence in South Carolina have already had their issues solved years ago. It's not an ongoing issue for them. But because of North Carolina's leadership, or I'm probably more accurate to say lack thereof leadership, people in this state, 1,400 families, are still waiting for homes to either be rebuilt or rehabilitated. So, yes, absolutely in favor of state relief. But we have to make sure that our state is capable of actually doing it. Because if we just look back at the history books, if we used a somewhat recent example of the state managing hurricane relief, I would say, no, you need to keep FEMA 100% operational in what it's doing. Because the state's even somehow, in some cases, worse at handling these natural disasters than FEMA, which sounds pretty hard to wrap your head around. Sounds like a pretty unbelievable statement, really. The state is worse than the federal government in relief? Well, yeah, if you look at what's going on with NCOR, if you look at what's going on in eastern North Carolina, then yeah. The answer to that would be yes, absolutely. So that was his first right off the bat comments as he got off the plane. Now, a little bit after that, he made his way into a little staging area. It looks like maybe inside of a hangar over at the Asheville Municipal Airport. He didn't fly into the full airport there in Asheville, just a little south of town. And he was meeting with lawmakers. The governor was there. The governor of Tennessee was there. State and congressional lawmakers all in attendance at this. And then he talked more about FEMA as a whole and how we go forward. These are some more of the president's comments on Friday here in North Carolina.
I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. I think, frankly, FEMA is not good. I think when you have a problem like this, I think you want to go and, whether it's a Democrat or Republican governor, you want to use your state to fix it and not waste time calling FEMA. And then FEMA gets here and they don't know the area. They've never been to the area. And they want to give you rules that you've never heard about. They want to bring people that aren't as good as the people you already have. And FEMA's turned out to be a disaster. And you could go back a long way. You could go back to Louisiana. You could go back to some of the things that took place in Texas. It turns out to be the state that ends up doing the work. It just complicates it. I think we're going to recommend that FEMA go away. And we pay directly. We pay a percentage to the state. But the state should fix this. If the state did this from the beginning, it would have been a lot better situation. I think you guys agree with that, right? So I just want to say that Asheville, I know it well. It's a great place, and we're going to have it be a great place again. That was the one that was most severely affected. But North Carolina is going to come back bigger, better, stronger than ever before. And you're going to be very thankful. And you've already seen, I know that it really began 4 days ago, but you've already seen more action than you have in the last 3 months.
And he's absolutely right about that. He is absolutely right about seeing more in the last, and this was, of course, Friday when this happened, that we had seen more in the last 4 days than we had in 3 months. Now, yes, was Diane Criswell from FEMA, was she on the ground here in North Carolina? Yes. Were other individuals? Did Biden make a stop here to North Carolina when he was still the president, the 46th president of the United States? Yes, he did. Not saying those people weren't here. That would be inaccurate to say. But just because they were here doesn't mean things were getting done. Just because they were here doesn't mean that the ball was being moved down the field. Maybe you watched some NFL football yesterday. What's the objective? Always be moving the ball down the field. Whether it's 1 yard at a time or 10 yards or 15 chunk plays, you got to keep moving the ball down the field. That's how you win a football game. And in regards to hurricane relief, hurricane recovery, you have to continue to move that ball down the field. And what we've seen from FEMA, what we saw from the previous administration, was a lot of people sitting there twiddling their thumbs. We saw trailers being staged and just sitting vacant at properties in Asheville. Those videos are all over social media. These temporary FEMA structures sitting vacant, all lined up in a row because of bureaucracy and red tape associated with actually getting them deployed, getting those assets available to people that really, really needed them. So just because you're here, just because there are physical beings on the ground, does not mean that things are being done. And that was the issue. And that's been the biggest criticism, or one of the big criticisms of FEMA, and rightfully so. Things are not moving anywhere near as quickly as they should be. This is not the first time that FEMA has dealt with a natural disaster. Yes, the geography is tricky out in the western half of the state. Yes, mountainous areas like that are not used to dealing with hurricanes, are not used to dealing with the massive amount of rainfall and the damage and destruction that we saw. All of that is accurate. But just because it's a tricky situation, just because it's something that FEMA isn't uniquely familiar with that specific kind of geography, I don't think excuses the issues. And the issues are not just the fact that the recovery is slow. Look at the issues with hotel vouchers. We talked about this last week, where you had individuals that did not know whether or not they would have a place to stay 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. Because on one hand, or one side of their mouth, FEMA's saying, yes, your hotel vouchers are still valid and we're going to extend it. Then on the other side of FEMA's mouth, they're telling the hotel operators, nope, the vouchers aren't good, kick these people out, which is literally what happened. There's posts on Tom Tillis and Ted Budd's X accounts from late at night, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. They're posting information on their X, their social media accounts, talking about how they're fielding calls from individuals that are literally getting kicked out of hotels and having to make frantic phone calls to whoever the hell's in charge over at FEMA, presumably Diane Criswell, the administrator, to figure out what's going on. Because the bureaucracy is too big. Long term, and again, two different parts here. You have short-term recovery, and then you have long-term recovery. Those are two completely different animals. Long-term, FEMA needs to, I tend to agree with President Trump. It either needs to be seriously overhauled or maybe even essentially dismantled, becoming nothing more than an agency that just doles out cash to local municipalities, states, however they decide to structure it. Long term, that's what needs to happen. But in the short term, right now, the immediate need, because that's still the case. I know it was a long time ago. We're talking about late September, actually to the day almost, when the storm affected western North Carolina. It was around the 27th. In the short term, individuals still need help. They still need the temporary shelter assistance, the TSA program that FEMA has. So breaking overnight was the fact that Trump signed an executive order aimed at drastically improving FEMA's efficiency, priority, and competence. And this is great news, of course. Fox News has got the story this morning. It reads as follows. President Donald Trump put the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, under review on Sunday after signing an executive order aimed at drastically improving the agency's efficiencies, priorities, and competence. Trump's executive order establishes the FEMA Review Council, which will be composed of no more than 20 members and co-chaired by the Secretaries of Homeland Security and Defense. The council is being formed after FEMA's response to Hurricane Helene and other recent disasters showed the need to improve efficiency, priorities, and competence, including evaluating whether FEMA's bureaucracy in disaster response hinders its ability to respond successfully, which I think is a pretty accurate thing to say. Now, reading directly from the executive order. This is the order Trump signed yesterday. Quote, despite obligating nearly $30 billion in disaster aid each of the past 3 years, FEMA has managed to leave vulnerable Americans without the resources or the support they need when they need it most. There are serious concerns of political bias in FEMA. Indeed, at least one former FEMA responder has stated that FEMA managers directed her to avoid homes of individuals supporting the campaign of Donald J. Trump for president. The executive order goes on to say, Americans deserve an immediate, effective, and impartial response to and recovery from disasters. FEMA therefore requires a full-scale review by individuals highly experienced at effective disaster response and recovery, who shall recommend to the president improvements or structural changes to promote the national interest and enable national resiliency. That sounds pretty realistic to me. The proof is in the pudding with FEMA, unfortunately. Individuals, yes, have had to deal with big government bureaucracy when they need help the most. And it's kind of funny because J.D. Vance almost said the exact same thing of this executive order when he was on CBS's Face the Nation this weekend. Listen to what J.D. Vance had to say just yesterday morning on CBS.
This is, I think, one of the fundamental premises of President Trump's leadership. The American people should expect more of their government. When there's a terrible disaster, they should expect food, medicine, and water to get to the people who need it. When there's a terrible fire in California, the fire hydrants ought to actually turn on. I am sick of the American people having such low expectations for their government. They should demand more of us because this is the greatest country in the world, and that's what Donald Trump's leadership promises to bring back. And this is, I think, one of the...
They should demand more from us, talking about the federal government. Absolutely. It's almost tax time. I'm sure you've maybe gotten some emails or had some mail come in over the last couple of weeks. W-2s, 1099s, all of those fun documents start rolling in this time of year. It's so wonderful. And of course, you'll go through those documents. You'll take a look at everything that you made this year and how much of it you give back to the state and federal government. And in response, is whether you like it or not, most of you, including myself, not, but whether you like it or not, in return for that, you're supposed to be getting services. Right? When you look at local government, you pay your local county property taxes. What do you get in response to that? Well, you get schools. You get things like public safety, funds things like parks and the public boat ramps and things like that we have here on the coast. That's what you're getting in exchange for the dollars that you are giving to the state government, or in this case, local government. Similar things over at the state. You get state resources associated with that. And at the federal government, you're supposed to be getting federal resources. So the federal government takes up and sucks up all of this money through the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, doles it out to all of their various agencies like FEMA. And what's the response? People go, well, damn, the federal government's here, and we know what that means. Bad response, slow response, poor response. I think J.D. Vance is absolutely spot on correct when he says that we should expect more from our federal government. There's no question about it. There's no excuse for it. We should expect more. We should demand more. You don't have a choice whether you pay your federal taxes or not. You can try not to. I can promise you it won't end well. But you don't get a choice. And for that, the federal government needs to be incredibly receptive to our needs. Agencies like FEMA need to be set under there needs to be a very high expectation set for them. And right now there's not. The expectation is piss poor. The expectation is incredibly low. Go ask people in Western North Carolina if they expected the federal government to come in and solve their problems. I guarantee you the vast majority of them would say, no, unfortunately not. I expected FEMA to come in and just kind of muck up the whole situation. Think about how miserable that is. Think about how awful it is that individuals that pay their taxes, same way that you and I do, have the expectation that the federal government, who says, hi, I'm from the federal government, I'm here to help. Their expectations are so low for the government. That's got to change. And as you just heard from Vice President Vance, that's the kind of thing that he and Trump are going to try and usher forward. Those are the kinds of big swooping changes that Trump and Vance are going to push for. And they should, because we as the American people, and I don't say that we deserve things. I'm not a big, I deserve this, I deserve this, I deserve that. No. For the most part, you really don't deserve anything. You work hard, you get what you work for. That's how our society works. But in this case, we do deserve this kind of response from the federal government. We deserve things to work in an efficient, effective, and competent way. Why do we deserve it? Because we don't have a choice. See, there's the difference. You don't get a choice whether you pay your federal taxes every year. You don't get a choice whether you play with the IRS. That money is taken out of your paycheck if you're a W-2 employee, irregardless of whether you like or don't like the response that you're getting from the government. If you're a 1099 contractor, that money is taken out either quarterly or at one huge lump sum at the end of the year. You don't get a choice. And for the fact that there is no choice available, We should be adamant that we deserve better services in regards to agencies like FEMA. There's just no question about it. We deserve it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think JD Vance is absolutely spot on with that. Now, how does that come into practical terms? How do we actually see a change? Well, I think Trump is starting at the right place. Starting with this executive order. Which again, going back to the article over at Fox News this morning, the executive order is set to drastically improve the agency's efficiency, priorities, and competence. Sounds fair to me. I would argue all three of those areas, at least from what we've seen, not what we've been told, right? Because those are two different stories. But from what we've actually seen on the ground, that has not been the case. It has not been efficient. The priorities have not been there at all. And the competence, I mean, it's laughable. Complete and total incompetence in regards to FEMA. Oh, I'm sorry. We can't put a temporary shelter on this property because it's in an area where it could flood. So what's the solution? Go live in a tent next to your house for the next 6 months. Oh, by the way, it's January. It's snowing and it's freezing freaking cold. But hey, I'm the federal government. We're here to help you. Let me go through my manual of bureaucratic red tape and see what we can actually do to help. It's laughable. It's completely laughable. And what's the end result? Like, what's the real world result of this? It's that people are hurt. People are struggling. Economies are ravaged. People are hopeless. Shouldn't be happening in America. Not with our level of federal government. Not with the amount of money that we piss away on stupid BS year after year after year. Completely unexcusable. Completely unexcusable. So I'm so glad that Trump made his literal first visit as the 47th president of the United States to Western North Carolina and then made his way out to LA. It proves that when he said during the campaign that he was not going to forget the people of Western North Carolina, once again, another promise made, another promise kept. And long term, we probably need to look at completely gutting and revitalizing FEMA and changing the way in which it operates as an agency, because what we see right now is no good. What we see right now is a disaster, as Trump noted. I want to remind you, if you want to get some additional content, including daily show notes and access to our monthly hangout, we'll be doing a Zoom call a little bit later on this week. Do kind of a roundtable political discussion. We'll be chatting with our various patrons. That's not going to be available on YouTube, X, or Rumble. It's just going to be for those that subscribe to the Patreon over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. You can sign up there. There's a couple of tiers available, $5 and $10 a month. If you believe you're getting some value and want to support the program, it's patreon.com/Nick Craig. We've had a couple of very generous individuals come on board and support the program thus far over at our Patreon. Can't thank them enough. We've got Jay Hill commenting over on our Rumble this morning, says, "Great show, Nick. Listeners like and sub if you want this content to continue. He has to succeed." Thanks, Jay Hill. It is greatly appreciated. Thanks for joining us this morning. And yes, give us a like and follow on all of the various platforms if you're watching this morning. Over on a platform like Rumble, you can subscribe to the channel there over at rumble.com/The Nick Craig Show. So back to Trump in Western North Carolina Friday, rather. He made his way to Swannanoa, which is one of the areas that was truly devastated. Much of Western North Carolina was hit incredibly hard. A lot of it, of course, the media center of attention is Buncombe County and Asheville. It's the largest population center in the western half of the state. So it makes sense that that's where a lot of the cameras have been. That's where a lot of the emphasis has been. It's a major, huge economic hub in the western half of the state. Trump also announced an executive order in regards to regulations for the cleanup and recovery. Again, The storm has passed 150 days ago. And we know, whether it's state, local, or federal governments, that too much red tape, too much bureaucracy and permitting and all this other nonsense gets in the way. We saw Trump make some comments on that out in Los Angeles when he was chatting with the mayor out there, and Mayor Muriel Bowser. There's just no way that this stuff can happen at a pace when government requires you to get 16 permits to take a tree off of your house. Or government makes you jump through hoops for months on end to get a new road connected to your property. There's just no place for that in the time of disaster. And the president had some comments in regards to that when he was in the Swannanoa area on Friday. Take a listen.
I'm pleased to announce that under our leadership, the federal government will be surging housing solutions to the state that go beyond mere temporary hotel stays that ended up being very short term. The government wouldn't do it any longer, which is ridiculous. We'll marshal all available resources to bring back potable water and make your water and infrastructure dramatically more reliable very quickly. Today, I'll also be signing an executive order slashing all red tape and bureaucratic barriers and permits to ensure the rapid reconstruction of the roads here in western North Carolina. We're going to go through a permitting process that's called no permitting, just get it done. That's the way they built them many years ago, I guarantee you that, right?
Just get it done. It's going to be called no permitting process, just get it done. And that's the point that we're at. Right? We just have to get it done. The storm has been here. It has done its damage. It has done its destruction. You can't jump back in a time machine and go back and change it. It's done. Unfortunately, a lot of lives lost. More than 100 people lost their lives in our state. It was one of the deadliest natural disasters to ever affect the state of North Carolina. One of the deadliest in the United States. So the question is, what do we do on the other side of it? And like what the president just said, we've got to cut out the red tape, cut out the bureaucracy, and get it done. Trump talked about that when he was in Western North Carolina. Trump talked about that when he was in California. Busy day for the president on Friday. Not only was he here, but then he was also out in Los Angeles, sitting down with leaders, individuals like Karen Bass, who's the mayor out in Los Angeles. And listen to this little back and forth. Listen to this back and forth with Karen Bass, who, of course, wasn't there when the wildfires happened. She was out of the country doing God knows what. Listen to this back and forth with a reporter and Trump getting in about the process of cleaning up their homes. There are still areas in California where they're still not allowing people back. There's a guy on YouTube that I watch. He's a tech YouTuber. He lost his home, completely burned to the ground in Los Angeles. But he's got a separate office. Has still not been back to his office. It's the only his only possessions that he has left are at this office, and he's still not allowed back because of the bureaucracy, because of the red tape. This is a very, very good exchange back and forth in Los Angeles. Take a listen.
We're bringing our city departments together so that people don't get caught in the loop of going from one room to the next. We want them all to be in the same room so that you can get busy rebuilding ASAP. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And we will clear the lots, absolutely, in the city and in the county. We are working together. Both levels of government are working in unity.
Months? Is it like we that's the answer that we got, and that's what we're all hanging on?
Yes.
So if you're telling us now faster, is it 6 months? Is it, I mean, all of our lives, rents, all this stuff is weighing on this.
6 months is no good.
And the number one thing that we are going to do immediately, and you will see this happen, is to clear out the debris. And you know we're concerned right now over the weekend because of the potential rain, but we are going to move as fast as we can, but we want you to be safe, and we want you to be back in your homes immediately.
But the people are willing to clean out their own debris. It doesn't
Yes,
cost
and
a
they
lot.
can,
You
and
should
they are
let them
able
do
to-
it because
No, no,
by the
they
time you
can do
hire
that.
contractors, it's
Right.
going to be 2 years.
If a family...
People are willing to get a dumpster and
By the I just got to cut Trump off here, and then we'll continue it. Trump is so beside himself with this. He's like, what the hell is your issue? People can hire... Let's be honest about this. We're talking about the Pacific Palisades in California. Many of those individuals, not all of them, but many of those individuals are more than capable of hiring private cleanup crews to get their land cleared so they can begin the process of rebuilding. But because of big government regulation in California, they're not allowed to do it. And Trump's like, what the hell has to happen so that you guys get out of the way so these people can get back to their lives?
do it themselves and clean it out.
And they can
There's
do
not that much left. It's all incinerated.
That's right.
And, you know, it's just going to take a long time if you do. You can do some of it, but a lot of these people, I know that guy right there that's talking. I know my people. You'll be on that thing tonight, throwing the stuff away, and your site it'll look perfect within 24 hours, and that's what he wants to do. He doesn't want to wait around for 7 months till the city hires some demolition contract that's going to charge him $25,000 to do his lot. Yeah. I think you have emergency powers just like I do, and I'm exercising my emergency powers. You have to exercise them also.
I did exercise them.
Because I looked, I mean, you have a very powerful emergency power, and you can do everything within 24 hours.
Yes. And if individuals want to clear out their property, they can. Well, yes, but you know that you will be able to go back soon.
Mr. President.
We think within a week.
That's a long time, a week. I'll be honest. To me, everyone's standing in front of their house. They want to go to work, and they're not allowed to do it.
And the most important thing is for people to be safe.
See, this whole, the most important people to be safe, I'm sorry. Yes, that is true. Obviously, the government does not want to put their citizens in a position where they're not safe, where they travel back to an area that's not safe. But we're talking about some of these houses burned down like 3 weeks ago. Some of these houses have been incinerated 3 weeks ago. There's no more fire. Yes, is there debris? Yes. Could there be sharp metal and other things in that debris that's dangerous? Yes. But Trump's like, again, why can't they get back today? Why couldn't they get back 2 weeks ago? The fire threat, at least in most of these areas, not all, but in most of these areas, is said and done with. Trump is like, it seems like he's losing his mind. He cannot wrap his head around why this is taking so long because it's completely illogical.
They're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe. They're not safe now. They're going to be much safer. A week is actually a long time, the way I look at it. I watched hundreds of people standing in front of their lots, and they're not allowed to go in. It's all burned. It's gone. It's done. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to burn anymore. There's nothing to burn. There's almost nothing to burn. And they want to go in. The people are all over the place. They're standing, and they say, why aren't you going in? We're trying to get a permit. And the permit's going to take them, everybody said 18 months. You said 18 months. You said 18 months.
That was last night.
And that was last night. On that.
We can't even see our home.
What you're hearing from the reporters is they were told, so this would have been Thursday night. They were told Thursday night, 18 months to clear a lot. 18 months to clear a lot.
Right now, we are blocked from entering our streets.
Right.
We can't even. This is our first time we saw our house. It was yesterday.
Oh, man. Oh, man, oh, man, oh, man. I am so freaking happy that Trump is back in the Oval Office and is sitting right next to the mayor in Los Angeles. Well, not right next to her. Melania is sitting next to her. Sitting one person away from the mayor in Los Angeles and taking her to task on the PR narrative spin that's going on versus what's actually happening. To absolutely taking her to task. And this whole 18-month thing, well, where is that coming from? Well, there's an article over at Fox 11 Los Angeles that claims that individuals were told that it could take upwards of 18 months for them to get the required permits for them to get in and clear their lots. 18 months. Even though Karen Bass says, well, that's not the case. No, that's not the case. Yet all the reporters in the room are saying, you just told us that like less than 24 hours ago. You just told us it was going to take 18 months. So is it 18 months or not? And it sounds like, based on what I read over the weekend and what all of these reporters are saying, this is a direct quote. The Army Corps of Engineers told reporters Thursday night that it would be 18 months to get what they needed. 18 months. Yet, because of the PR spin, which is the only thing Democrats are good at. They're not good at governing. They're not good at leadership. They're not good at any of that. They're good at the PR spin because they've got all their friends in corporate media that bail them out of all of their issues. At least used to, but not anymore. Can you imagine if Joe Biden was sitting there? Imagine if Harris was sitting there on Friday. Bowser would be going, oh yeah, we're going to get everybody back. It's going to be real, maybe within the week. 4 weeks after your house burned to the ground. Oh yeah, we'll get you back in the week. If Trump wasn't there calling this out, it's a lie. Because it's constant misinformation from the left. And it's the perfect example of how big, overbearing, bureaucratic government doesn't work. Doesn't work. Case and point. You heard from one of the reporters right there at the end. It's the first time they were able to see their homes. These houses burned down 3 weeks ago. What safety concern? I get it. It's an awful, horrific situation. I mean, literally post-apocalyptic with some of the pictures out of the Pacific Palisades in and around the Eaton fire. It's an awful situation. But once again, you deserve, if you are a taxpayer in California, you're paying some of the highest state taxes anywhere in the country. You deserve to have a government that is responsive to your needs. You absolutely deserve to have a government that allows you to clear your property. We're talking private property here. And like Trump said, so they're going to have to wait 7 months for the city to hire a cleanup crew and then charge your insurance company $25,000 to push a bunch of burned ash into the street to then have it put into a dump truck. That's exactly what would happen. I hope Trump continues to flex his muscle over California because it's the only way any of these people will ever be able to rebuild their properties. It's the only way that these individuals will ever see relief. If we believe the nonsense coming out of Karen Bass's mouth, these people will never be able to rebuild their homes. Never. Literally never. Most of these homes are from the 60s. You know how much the California building code has changed since then? It's literally never going to happen. So props to the president for taking the Los Angeles mayor, who has done a terrible job with this disaster. You thought the relief was bad here in North Carolina with Roy Cooper. We had it good in comparison to this. Props to Trump for taking her to task and calling her out and saying, no, this stuff can happen immediately. You know, it's funny. I was watching Fox News Friday when Trump was about to land or had already landed in North Carolina, and Trey Gowdy was on. And Trey Gowdy was mentioning he lives in northern South Carolina, like probably north of the Greenville area, I think is what he said. And he was talking about Helene. Of course, it hit that area. He said he lives about an hour south of Asheville. So that area got hit pretty good too. And he talked about hiring a private tree company to come in and clear the trees on his property. Because that's what's happening in Western North Carolina. People are hiring private companies to get the work done so they can start the process of working with their insurance company to get their homes back. That's what's going on. That's what needs to happen. Yet they're not allowed to do that in Los Angeles because of the overarching government control. It's a disgrace. But unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I can't say it's surprising or shocking. I expect exactly this kind of response from Los Angeles. I expect exactly this kind of response from the People's Republic of California. Ineptness and complete and total incompetence. It's a really sad event. It's sad in both places. It's sad in Western North Carolina. It's sad in Southern California. Government has miserably failed these individuals all over the board. State, local, federal, it doesn't matter. It's been a failure on so many different levels. We not only need to expect more, we need to demand more out of our government. Again, we don't have a choice. You don't get to choose whether you pay your property taxes or your state income tax or your federal tax. That money is taken away from you, and in exchange, you get piss poor government services. No more. This stuff's got to change. I want to remind you that you can take the show with you 24/7, 365 by checking out the Nick Craig Show via podcast. If you can't join us live, weekday mornings on YouTube, Rumble, and X, I encourage you to head on over to your favorite podcast app. Search for the Nick Craig Show, and if your store or the place you listen allows you to rate the program, give us a 5-star rating if you'd like. If you're enjoying the show and believe you're getting some good content, it's available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app or by visiting the website nickcraig.com. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, Shawn Hendrix will join us. He has spent some time. He was in Western North Carolina on Friday when Trump was there. We'll get a true on-the-ground report from him, how we go forward with agencies like FEMA coming up after this. You're listening to The Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. And welcome back to the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X. Don't forget you can support the program and get access to bonus content by visiting our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/Nick Craig. We'll be announcing a little bit later on today our first Zoom call hangout of the month. That's one of the bonus perks that you get for subscribing to the show over on Patreon. Stay tuned for that. It's patreon.com/Nick Craig. And again, appreciate all of those that have come aboard and supported us with this venture. It's kind of tricky breaking away from the corporate media landscape, but greatly appreciate those folks over at patreon.com/Nick Craig. As we've continued our conversation this morning about Trump's visit out in Western North Carolina on Friday, his first visit since being back in the Oval Office, it's my pleasure to welcome Shawn Hendrix to the Nick Craig Show this morning. Shawn is a very prominent individual on social media, influencer over on X. He also runs Operation Shelter. Shawn, thanks for the time this morning. You were posting while Trump was out in parts of the Asheville area on Friday. First, give us assess the situation now. We're talking about a hurricane from late September of last year. Assess the current situation on the ground in Asheville as you've been encountering and seeing it.
I mean, there hasn't much been changed since 4 months ago. We've got the roads clear. It's just still so much. They say 4% of cleanup has happened so far. Over 4 months, if you do the math, I mean, we're talking years before we can clean the roads up. So, and I get it's a big project, but my point is there's nothing happening, right? The cleanup's just not happening. So people are like, oh, it takes time. Well, it takes forever if it doesn't start. And unless you're privately paying for it, it's just not happening. And this is the river basins, where the tourism comes in. There's trash in the trees. There's semi trucks in the river. There's shipping containers in the river. People aren't going to pay to kayak around trash and semi trucks. So we really need this cleaned up fast to save the economy. Asheville can't miss a year of tourism. People will just stop coming back. Once you make a trip somewhere else, that's going to become the place you go to next year. So, I mean, that's just where we're at. It's a dire need.
Obviously, things have been very slow in regards, as you're talking about, with some of these efforts. There's been an incredible amount of scrutiny on FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and other members and levers of the federal government under the previous administration. Trump's in the Oval Office 1 week ago on Monday. Here he is just a couple of days after that, making his way to Western North Carolina. Shawn, the words sound good. We might get rid of FEMA. We might restructure it. The reality is, people on the ground still really need a lot of help in the short term. What do some of those actions look like? Has Trump actually had an effect on the restoration, the recovery efforts, and some of the help that is still needed out west?
The Trump effect right now is people have hope. I was there on Friday. I was there in Swannanoa when he arrived. I talked to a lot of people, and I live streamed from the ground because I wanted a record of what Swannanoa looked like when Trump showed up, because we already see it. There's people saying, oh, the job was almost done. Trump's coming and taking credit. It's just not true. And when I talked to people on the ground, the word I kept hearing was hope. It's finally going to get fixed. And then we're talking about people who, I had some guy tell me, I can't believe I'm happy to see Trump. Right? Wow. This isn't just a bunch of Trump fans. These are people who are desperate for any help. They're like, I don't care. I had one guy tell me, he goes, Hamas could bring me money. I would take it because I need it. He's just basically, what he's saying is like, I don't care where the help comes from. And so hope is back, and there's been so much stress with this situation. And so to finally have some hope is helping people's mental health. The other thing is FEMA immediately extended the rooms till March or May. I can't remember which one it is, but it's long enough that we're in Operation Shelter. We're not in crisis mode. We're taking calls at 4:00 in the morning where people are trying to get shelter. Or they're finding out at 11 in the morning they're getting kicked out of their hotel with 3 kids and it's 14 degrees outside. So FEMA immediately extended those. Was that Trump? I don't know, but he's their new boss, and now they're doing what they're telling them to. So that's the big change.
I think that's one of the things that's been so shocking to me through this entire process. I think everybody listening this morning understands, especially at the federal level, government doesn't move in a very fast or efficient manner. That's not anything new. However, to watch individuals, as you're reporting and noting, literally not know if they're going to have a hotel room the next night because FEMA continues to move the ball as to what the deadline is for hotel vouchers seems completely inexcusable. Even the slowest and most bureaucratic form of government should be able to figure that out, but seemingly they couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, imagine it's 5:30 at night. It's 10 degrees outside. You get you and your 3 kids in the hotel room. And you find out at 5:30 the night before you're getting kicked out that you have shelter. Like, that's an insane amount of stress on somebody. And you're living in a hotel, you're already under an insane amount of stress. And I don't understand why we didn't do this 3 months ago. We put people through hell when we could have just flipped a switch and done it till March or May. No laws changed, no congressional hearings, like nothing changed other than FEMA just doing what they were supposed to do. And I know people keep saying, oh, FEMA's not supposed to be cleanups. FEMA's not supposed to be first responders. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about temporary shelter that FEMA's known for doing, and you're rug pulling them every 3 days. I think that was the biggest frustration, is just like, you could have done it the whole time and you waited till Trump got in office. I just don't understand why.
And it's exactly the frustration. And Shawn, nobody loves living in a hotel room. I mean, anybody that's traveled for an extended period of time, there's nothing worse than spending an extended period in a hotel room. These people have lost their homes, their businesses, their farms, whatever it might be out in the western half of the state, and to be dealing with this constantly bouncing ball as to where relief's going to be coming from. And I really want to focus on that. Yes, the federal government has its elements, but it's not been the federal government that was first on the ground. We saw Trump with Franklin Graham from Samaritan's Purse on Friday. I can only imagine what things would have looked like if groups like that were not first there on the ground when the federal and state government were essentially MIA.
Oh, let me tell you, if it wasn't for the nonprofits and they call us SUVs, spontaneous unaffiliated volunteers, right? We just pop up because we see a need and we come in and help. If it wasn't for those, I can't imagine what people would have done. People would have died. There's no doubt. And Samaritan's Purse, I'm so glad they had Samaritan's Purse up there, because that is the organization that deserved to be up there. Every time we had a helicopter show up, it was full of Samaritan's Purse supplies. Every time I went on a corner, I saw the orange shirt, Samaritan's Purse. Now, Baptist on Mission was up there. Hands for Hope was up there. There's a lot of places, a lot of people up there, but Samaritan's Purse was all over the place. So when they put Samaritan's Purse up there, I knew they had gone around and asked who was doing the work. We're a fraction of the size of Samaritan's Purse. I mean, a microscopic fraction. And we did what we could do. And a lot of people like us just did their piece. And that made a huge difference.
Let's look at the roadmap going forward. The storm at this point, again, late September when it affected the area, as we're about to wrap up the month of January, the new year, head into February. How do you think things play out over the next couple of months for these individuals? At least it's going to be getting a little bit warmer. Maybe that will help with some of these recovery efforts. How do you expect things to go over the next 3, 4, 6 months?
Well, I don't think I hope it's not overstated. Trump still has a huge mountain to climb here, right? This isn't going to be an easy snap of the fingers fix, but it has to start fast, and it needs a lot of money. And I've actually already been contacted by some of the people they've put in charge. So they're reaching out to us that are on the ground to say, how do we do this? JD Vance, when he came out, their team called me right before they came out. And the things I asked, they brought up when they came out here because they knew it was real on the ground intel. And so they're listening to the people. They're not coming in and telling us what they're going to do. They're coming in and say, how can we help? And how we can help is unleashing billions of dollars to get cleanup done. I think really the first thing we need to do is get people stable in temporary shelter, get things cleaned up, and then rebuild. Because if we clean up, then businesses can get back to normal while we rebuild. We need the economy going while we rebuild. People need jobs, or they don't have money to rebuild their homes, and they won't be able to pay their taxes. They won't be able to pay for food, and they'll all have to leave the area. And so clean up and rebuild, and it's just a ton of cash.
Shawn, tell us about your group, Operation Shelter. What are some of the things that you're actively involved in right now? Where can folks find out more information on that?
Yeah, so you can follow me over on X at the Shawn Hendrix. Operation Shelter is a Give, Send, Go campaign. We've raised over $440,000. It's all we started out in the phases. We started as rescue. We were doing communications with Starlink. Then we went into relief. We were bringing trailer loads of supplies in, heaters, generators with Mercury One. Mercury One sent so much stuff to us in the relief effort. And then now, finally, since FEMA's extended the hotels, Operation Shelter has fully moved into the rebuild phase. We announced our first full home rebuild on Friday with News Nation. And we basically talked to this lady. We didn't tell her what was going on. She's like, look, I've lost everything. I paid my house off in 2013. Oof. I'm close to retirement. How do I restart right now? I've got my daughter and her 2 kids living with me, and we watched our house float down the river. And she's in tears, and I would love it because Aaron was able to say, we're going to rebuild your house for you. Now, are we going to rebuild 1,000 houses? Probably not. But we're going to rebuild a house, and as many houses as people will fund, we're going to keep rebuilding. Matter of fact, Mercury One has already stepped up and said, hey, we're going to cover a good chunk of the materials. So we might be able to rebuild 2 houses, and that might turn into 3 and 4. But each house is a bite out of the problem, right? It's a family that's restored. It's economy that's going again. It's people with forever home. And that's just what we feel like our calling is right now, is to restore people, like Trump said in LA, a little bit better than they had before. They deserve it, right? She had a trailer house before. We're building her a real house. So she's like, I can't sleep in a trailer house ever again. My house floated away. And I'm like, we're not going to do that. We're going to build a real house for you. And it's going to be bigger. It's going to be better. And everyone's going to love it, like Trump said.
Shawn, thank you so much for your insight this morning and for joining me. Tell folks again where they can get connected with you on social media.
At x.com, at the Shawn Hendrix, just like it's spelled on the screen there. And then you can just search Operation Shelter and we'll come up on Give, Send, Go.
Shawn Hendrix joins us this morning on The Nick Craig Show. And again, you can follow Shawn over on X at the Shawn Hendrix, ShawnHendrix, at the Shawn Hendrix over on X. He is a wealth of information, and really appreciate Shawn joining us on the show this morning as, again, we continue to recount and go over some of the issues that are taking place and continue to take place over in portions of Western North Carolina. Appreciate Shawn's time. Some great insight this morning here on the Nick Craig Show. So as we wrap up the conversation this morning, a busy week expected here across the state of North Carolina as we talk about hurricane relief and recovery. Well, the General Assembly is slated to be back in Raleigh on Wednesday. And with that, 2 o'clock Wednesday afternoon, there is going to be a House Select Committee on Helene recovery. That is taking place at 2 o'clock. I'll be planning as of right now to jump back on X and Rumble Live coming up Wednesday afternoon. We'll watch that House Select Committee together and go through some of the details that come out of that, as there is so much work that continues to need done in the western half of the state. And obviously the General Assembly gaveling back in on Wednesday to begin their long session. We'll track those details right here on the Nick Craig Show. Again, I want to remind you, if you would like to take the show with you, tell your friends about the program. It's great to be back here covering issues in southeastern North Carolina, the state as a whole, that they can subscribe to the podcast wherever they get their shows. Just head on over to your favorite podcast app, search for the Nick Craig Show, and subscribe to it, and you'll get that new show delivered each and every weekday morning. You can also listen on your computer at nickcraig.com. That's going to do it for a Monday edition of the Nick Craig Show. Thanks for joining us live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, and X, or listening to the podcast. We're back tomorrow morning at 7. Have a great Monday.